A wedding, 2 newlyweds, 4 parents. Who got married? It certainly wasn't me. The first wedding after returning to China was just the prelude. On March 3rd, an auspicious day, couples were about to embark on a turning point in their lives at a grand hotel in the south of the city. The guest book was filled with blessings written in bold, flowing calligraphy, while a large platter next to it was piled high with red envelopes, dazzling the eye. The bride's friend stood by the table, nodding and smiling, sweetly saying thank you to each guest. Under the table, her high-heeled feet kept shifting their position, a truly tiring task. Suddenly, a pair of chubby hands reached up to her nose. A red envelope of $999, for good luck. Come and give me a piece. The bride's friend looked up in surprise, wondering if this person had come to cause trouble. The newcomer had an oval face, his eyes were squinting with laughter, and a dimple on the right corner of his mouth was flashing. Her friend shrieked, "Amy," and rushed over from beside the table, grabbing the person's slightly chubby finger. "You're back." Only this person, despite being tall and thin, had fingers that were different from ordinary people, plump and tender, tapering towards the fingertips. Such a grown man, yet possessing hands like a child. "My name is Amy. I'm a returnee from overseas, but also unemployed. I just got back to China yesterday, and the first thing I did upon returning was to watch someone get married. Yeah, I'm back. Back home." I nodded and smiled, grabbing my old high school friend's hand and pretending to be fierce. "1 yuan, give it to me." The other party was more aggressive than me. "Come on, you're both the groom's college classmate and the bride's junior high school classmate. You're not going to give me double the wedding gift." She finished speaking with displeasure and pinched my cheek. "Don't think I don't know. I wrote the invitation. Hurry up and find me a seat, the groom's side or the bride's side, sit wherever you like, it's up to you." I touched my nose, sheepishly tucked my tail between my legs, and wandered around the table. It was too early, there weren't many people there, so I went outside to wait. Standing on the back porch outside the hall, I called my best friend Sophie, one of the 4 beauties in our college dormitory. In fact, there were only 4 people in the dormitory, and Sophie was the only one who stayed in the city to work. The ringtone rang for a long time before being answered. The person on the other end exclaimed in surprise, "You're back." Well, I'm used to this kind of surprise by now. I was chatting with this woman on MSN just last week, telling her I was going back to China soon and asking her to receive my wedding invitation. But I was still very happy. The sound of chattering and laughter outside the corridor, along with the babbling brook and small bridge, was something I hadn't heard in 5 years. I kicked at the pebbles by the wall and said, What are you doing?" "I'm here." Sophie was putting on her shoes at the door, holding her high heels and wearing earphones, and said, "Don't rush, prepare properly. Attending a wedding is just a disguised blind date." I was speechless at her theories as a matchmaking expert. Sophie grabbed her bag and went downstairs, her high heels clicking loudly. "Amy," she said, "you know, over the years, nobody knows all the coffee shops in town better than me." I laughed while holding my phone, repeatedly saying yes, yes. Sophie opened the car door and changed her headphones. "By the way, let's go on a blind date together next time, sis. I'll introduce you to a good one." I agreed carelessly, because this person's temper is worse than anyone else's. Sophie drove off, rambling on and on, when she suddenly blurted out, "Amy, have you thought about seeing him since you came back?" I was speaking peacefully when she suddenly asked that question, catching me completely off guard. I knew Sophie's thinking was always unpredictable, but hearing her bring it up still surprised me. The weather was perfect today, the early spring sun shone on my face, warm and fuzzy. A few goldfish swam leisurely in the small pond, and I squatted by the edge to watch them. How could I not miss him? How could I not want to see him? Over the past 5 years, I've secretly wondered what kind of work he did, what kind of people he interacted with, and what kind of house he lived in. I think about him less and less, but it's a lingering concern I can't forget. I want to see him, yet I'm afraid to see him. I'm afraid that if I see him not doing well, I'll be sad. If he's doing well, I'll still be sad. He can still be fine without me, can't he? The more I miss someone, the more I fear meeting them. Sophie continued on the other end of the phone. Where is the photo shoot? The guy has to be 1.8 meters tall. I was completely bewildered. Huh? Sophie gritted her teeth. You just agreed. Tell me, where's the blind date? What are your requirements? I chuckled and said, whatever you want, location is fine, height is fine, clothing is fine, everyone is fine. Sophie laughed heartily. In that instant, she remembered when she first entered university. She pulled a girl aside and asked where she could find a bamboo pole to hang a fan. The girl looked at her blankly and said, I picked up some branches outside. 5 years have passed, and Sophie is laughing freely, suddenly feeling that the silly Amy has returned. I hung up the phone and prepared to walk to the gate to wait for Sophie. I figured she should be arriving soon by car. Just as I stood up to leave, I turned around and saw a familiar yet unfamiliar figure standing on the porch, and suddenly I froze. I think Sophie is such a jinx. It's not a question of whether she wanted to meet him or not, she's already met him. Before I was mentally prepared, before I knew what to do or how much to smile, I met him so fiercely. I think that even if I had more time, I still wouldn't know how to face it. A gentle spring breeze brushed past his brow, then grazed the corner of my eye. I closed my eyes briefly, the dampness in the breeze touched my brow. He leaned against the corridor. The naive boy of 5 years ago had now become a mature man with sharp features, his clear eyes hidden behind sharp glasses, flashing with a sharp chill. I know his appearance has always been the kind that stands out in a crowd, and it still is. But now he seems like a completely different person, sharp, piercing, like poison. Jack, his name has been etched into my life since I was 21. I vaguely recall that the sunlight that day was just as warm as today's. In my memory, the university campus was filled with blooming azaleas and the lingering scent of old camphor trees. A pretty girl took the boy's hand. Shoujie, look, your name is Shoujie, and mine is Amy. Aren't we destined to be together? The campus was always bustling with noise after class, filled with people coming and going. The boy, slightly annoyed, a faint blush rising at the base of his ears, gritted his teeth and whispered, Amy, try calling me Shoujie again, you're just a fake Amy. He cursed under his breath, but his hands moved gently, his fingertips brushing away the flower petals from the girl's hair as softly as a spring breeze. People came and went, and someone turned to look. The boy was embarrassed and threw his textbook at her. The girl cried out, ouch. Jack, why did you hit me on the head? He was once a top student in university, without those cold glasses, but with soft hair and a warm, large hand that held mine tightly. Now, his styled hair looked stiff and distinct, each strand clearly defined, the sunlight casting a metallic sheen on the ends. I noticed he was dressed extremely formally today, in a silk suit and a royal blue bow tie. I hesitated for a long time, wanting to say hello, but then swallowed the words back. Life is truly ironic. His words still seemed to echo in my ears. I remember the movies he liked, and I still can't bring myself to listen to the songs he once sang for me. I searched through supermarkets abroad, just to find the closest thing to the lemon-flavored candy in the yellow paper package he liked. These two people, years later, met again at someone else's wedding, or perhaps his own. I grinned and said, congratulations. After saying that, he cursed himself in his heart for his ugly appearance, for his insincere words, and for his own self-loathing. But what else could I say besides congratulations? I turned my head to one side, the sound of running water filling my ears, afraid that if I lowered my head, tears would fall. After a long silence, he said, "It's not my wedding, I'm just a groomsman." Then he added, "You really want me to get married that much?" The voice was chilling to the bone, as if a coldness was seeping into one's very veins. I didn't dare speak, feeling completely lost. I stole a glance and noticed he was holding a bottle of red wine. Well, that makes sense. What kind of groom carries a wine bottle around his wedding? Then I remembered the groom was his college roommate. Meeting him was so sudden, years of worry and tension had made me immediately think of the worst-case scenario. I suppose it was my own fault. I grumbled, but felt a little better, though I was still hurt by his coldness. Even though it was my own fault, hearing those words still pained me. I whispered, "I'm sorry." My voice trembled slightly, not just because of my misunderstanding. His expression changed, his eyes seemed to spit fire, and he gritted his teeth. "Amy, don't apologize to me. Saying sorry is an insult to my feelings. You don't owe me anything, and I'm doing this willingly." I looked up to see his face, but only saw his straight, proud back as he quickly disappeared around the corner. I covered my eyes and slowly walked out of the corridor. Soon, Sophie arrived and secretly told me that Jack was the best man. I sighed. I should have said that sooner. Oh well, I grinned, looking at him standing beside the newlyweds, with his chubby, adorable bridesmaids behind him. This was probably the last time I'd see him. "Jack, we've met so many times and missed so many opportunities in our lives. We've probably used up all our chances of being together without even realizing it." Sophie and I took our seats. The newcomers spoke. The man was Tom, slightly chubby, a really nice guy. I used to visit Jack's dorm a lot, so I always called him Old Tom. The woman was Vivian, a petite and cheerful girl. One was my junior high school classmate, and our relationship began when we went to the bathroom hand in hand. The other was my college classmate, who would always say, "Judge's wife, I'll treat you to dinner, but you and your husband should treat me to dinner first." It's amazing how these two people have grown up together and are now hand in hand. I can't help but marvel at how wonderful life is. Clapping enthusiastically, her eyes reddened. The most beautiful thing in the world is to be able to share happiness with friends she grew up with. In my excitement and emotion, I didn't notice that the best man glanced at the corners of my reddened eyes. Jack hadn't really wanted to be a groomsman, but he was the matchmaker. Heaven knows it was all a coincidence. One was his college roommate, the other a high school classmate, whom he bumped into at a roadside banquet. Why would a grown man like being a matchmaker? He was just being polite. It turns out everything has a cause and effect. He glanced at me casually, as was his habit of looking towards where I was in the crowd. This idiot, just like before, is always moved by other people's achievements, as if they were his own. He knew I was coming. Tom called to say he'd sent her an invitation, but she didn't say anything on the other end, her heart slowly tightening. Tom, however, thought he didn't want to see me and quickly said, "She hasn't come back. She had Sophie receive it for her. I guess she won't be coming." God knows how many times he longed for my return. Her signature changed again and again, and he looked at it again and again. When he saw her, returning to China in March, his heart pounded wildly once more, like a restless teenager, fidgeting with anxiety. After she left, he did try to force himself to stay single, but he couldn't, so he just went along with it. Until one day, someone asked him, "Are you still waiting for her?" He suddenly realized that he had been waiting subconsciously. Even after a long time, he didn't know what he was waiting for. He remained all alone. There is no one else in my heart like her, someone with dimples when she smiles like her, someone who whispers "Shojie" to me. It seems that all the passion of his life was spent with her, and he could no longer muster the energy. He had once thought about graduating and starting a family. But with her by his side, no hardship felt so bad. She left, but life goes on. Even without her, he remains a strong and upright man, and he will still live his own life. Even in the dead of night, he would still recall her smiling face. He had erased everything about her, but he could not sweep her away from his heart. A few years ago, he thought about her coming back, and how she would still call out to him with a smile. She would jokingly mention the story of Amy and Shoujie, and then he could rightfully tease her. He would keep a straight face, but inside he would be smiling and slowly shed tears. He thought about it 1,000 times, until he was too exhausted to think about it anymore. Silly Iolos, I haven't forgotten you. If you're going to come back, please hurry up, don't keep me waiting. On this day, he finally waited for her. Watching her squatting by the pool, his fingers gripping the wine bottle tightened involuntarily. As her familiar voice drew closer, and she told him she was going on a blind date, he suddenly realized he had overlooked the changes of the past 5 years. He was waiting for her. Would she come back and make him wait? To be honest, not only had she changed, but he himself couldn't recognize himself. Until he saw her again, all the memories flooded back. Realizing this change, his heart slowly cooled. He didn't understand her thinking, she actually thought he was the groom. Very well indeed. He never imagined that a simple congratulations could evoke such deep-seated hatred. Even if he did get married, he wouldn't invite her. He couldn't stand the thought of her sitting at his wedding table. He never accepted her congratulations. He never expected that after waiting and waiting, all he would receive was her "I'm sorry." In his entire life, the two phrases he least wanted to hear from her were, "Thank you" and "I'm sorry." The banquet began, and I, having lost all sense of proportion, was deeply affected by the setback. I ate the food voraciously and drank every drink offered, displaying incredible magnanimity, almost to the point of rolling up my sleeves. I even raised my hand and said, "I'll drink it all, you can do as you please." What a load of rubbish, he's not a man. Sophie was filled with regret, forcing a smile as she moved to the side. How could she have sat at the same table with someone like that? Looking at the man next to her with his unpleasant expression, she knew this blind date was a disaster. Sophie finally snapped after a long silence, pinching my ear and yelling, "Amy. It takes 10,000 years for a monkey to become human, but for you, a panda, to turn back into a monkey, it only takes 1 bottle of wine." After saying that, she glanced at the handsome man sitting opposite her, whose jaw was practically drooping, blushed slightly, and pulled me away. I was pulled so hard I was dizzy and stumbled along. I accidentally bumped into the groom, who was toasting the newlyweds. I stood up straight, bowed to the couple, and said in a surprisingly steady voice, "Congratulations." I was extremely sincere, not at all like someone who was drunk. Sophie pulled me aside and said with a forced smile, "I'm sorry, she's drunk." I carefully removed her hand from mine, waved to the newlyweds, and said, "Bye-bye." After saying that, she looked into the best man's dark eyes and said, "Goodbye." Amidst the clinking of glasses at the banquet, next to the newlyweds in red, stood a drunken, flushed woman, and a handsome best man with gleaming eyes, gazing at each other in silence, creating an incredibly eerie atmosphere. I turned and walked out, step by step, without looking back. He said, "Goodbye." His voice was so soft that only he could hear it. Goodbye, goodbye, never to see you again, or perhaps, to act foolishly again. The second thing I did after returning to China, got a haircut. I got up early this morning and tugged at my perpetually unbearable bangs. I just couldn't stand it anymore. I had arranged to go shopping with Lily today, and after more than 10 days of being a homebody, I finally got to go out. We went to the busiest street, and entered the largest hair salon. As the saying goes, you can change clothes if they are not good, but you can't start over if your haircut is bad. I'm not an extravagant person, but I should still be kind to my head. Once inside, I was amazed by the changes in China over the past 5 years, hairdressers are now categorized into senior stylists, expert stylists, and image designers, all master-level professionals. Even the salon girls are now called stylist assistants. Looking at all those signs, I was instantly overwhelmed and asked the sales assistant for a recommendation. The hairstylist was a young man who seemed to have good taste. He chatted with me while he trimmed my hair. I'm not one to be overly familiar with strangers, so my replies were mostly and no. I really didn't know what to say. My hairstylist suggested I get my hair done. I thought about it and decided it was a good idea, a fresh start, a new look. He blurted out, "Master, what kind of hairstyle should I have?" After saying that, I wanted to slap myself. It's not like a few years ago, who calls a trendy person master. Do you think he's a taxi driver? I'm so dizzy. I quickly grabbed a magazine and started flipping through it. In the mirror, the hairdresser paused, his hand holding the scissors still, before calmly saying, "Wukong, don't worry, I guarantee you'll be satisfied." My lips twitched. You really can't get by in this line of work without some serious skills. I sat there for hours, flipping through every magazine in the year, and finally I was done. I looked up, utterly speechless, and gritted my teeth, saying, "I don't want the wild type." The hairstylist brandished his large scissors. "This isn't wild, it looks great. Your hair is already curly, it suits you. See, let me scrunch it with my hands." I looked at my bird's nest-like hair in the mirror, felt heartbroken, paid the bill, and left. I called Lily to ask where we should meet, and she said, "The usual place." I laughed, and it suddenly reminded me of my childhood. Speaking of my relationship with Lily, it goes back a long way. We were kids in the same compound, and went to the same elementary school. After junior high, Lily moved away, but we unexpectedly bumped into each other again, when we were tutoring each other in physics in our final year of junior high. We continued hanging out and kept in touch ever since. When Lily met me, we were both children, and no one had yet explained to her what a nickname was, so the name Amy has been used ever since. I went to see Lily with this frizzy hair, and this mother of one laughed so hard. Lily tugged at my curly hair. "Who is this?" I could see a head from far away. I rolled my eyes. I might as well just shave my head. Lily laughed and said, "Don't be sad, come on, let's go eat." I perked up immediately. Lily always says things I really like. The two walked hand in hand, searching for food, as if they had returned to their teenage years. Once we were seated, Lily immediately pulled out a photo of her 1-year-old daughter to show me, her face beaming with pride. As I flipped through the pages, I was reminded of the little girl who would squat at a stall after school, eagerly buying stickers. She's now a married woman. And the young girl who bought gifts for her boyfriend, but was too afraid to take them home, and left them at my house. She's now a mother. I'm a little sentimental about time. It suddenly feels like the days have flown by. I brought a dancing toy doll for Lily's little girl, shrugged, and said, "Okay, all the gifts are distributed. Now it's time to freeload." Lily laughed. I know, this meal is on me, of course." The two laughed and joked, as if I had never left. Friendship is always so wonderful. There are still subtle changes. Lily's conversations always revolve around her children and husband, and I enjoy listening to her. Very few people talk to me like that. I blurted out, "Isn't that hard work?" Lily looked up and smiled. "Doing things that make you happy doesn't feel bitter." I didn't know what to say for a moment. Looking at Lily like this, I suddenly felt like something was missing in my heart, yet something else had also been added. After dinner, I picked up Lily's phone and started playing with it. The screensaver was a full-body photo of a male celebrity. I unlocked it, and another male celebrity's face was the wallpaper. My lips twitched. "Look at this. Is this a woman's phone? It's full of men's pictures. If I found it, I'd think it belonged to a man who had lost it." He pressed the button and pretended to say, change it back right now. Lily snatched the phone back, touched it a couple of times, and yelled, come on, this is the only place my man can't reach, how can you change it like that? I went through so much trouble to download it, isn't it cool? She looked completely smitten. I laughed, this person, even though she's a mother, is still infatuated with boys without end. I've gotten used to it. During the summer after graduating from junior high, I spent 2 months accompanying her to calligraphy lessons, just to see the calligraphy teacher, constantly praising how handsome he was. Even in her English class, she would swoon over the boy in front of her for a whole month. This habit has remained unchanged all these years. I looked at Lily, who was talking to me with great enthusiasm, and a smile crept onto my lips. I didn't even know what I was so happy about. Perhaps everyone will always retain something. For example, Lily's infatuation, Sophie's rapid-fire speech, Tom's obesity, my habit of always standing on the left when walking, and his habit of always standing on the right when walking. There are some habits he instilled in her. She herself doesn't realize that they've become a part of her, and she still retains them to this day. A few days later, on a dark and stormy night, I received a call from Sophie. The woman roared, you damn Amy, get to Ivy League right now. Now, immediately. I was startled and immediately hailed a taxi and left. Pushing open the restaurant door, I saw Miss Sophie sitting there with an elegant air. I walked over, nodded to the bespectacled, refined gentleman who had just left, and sat down in the seat he had vacated. Looking at Sophie's exquisitely applied makeup under the dim light, I wanted to laugh, but dared not. Sophie tapped the rim of her coffee cup with a small spoon and scolded me, you didn't show up when I asked you to come on a blind date, miss, what do you want? I was baffled, when? Sophie didn't even look up, completely ignoring me, look at your phone. I checked my phone and sure enough, there were several text messages lying there. Good heavens! I've never been in the habit of checking text messages. I was just watching TV and tidying up the house at home, how could I possibly notice them? He was momentarily speechless, and asked with a forced smile, I really didn't see it. How did the meeting go? Sophie snorted, I don't feel anything. I laughed, that person was really nice. What do you mean you didn't feel anything? Feelings can be cultivated. Sophie pointed at me with a spoon, don't give me that. What do you mean by cultivating? Do you think this is a TV drama? I don't even have any feelings for him now. If we really get married, do you think we'll suddenly develop feelings for each other over the next 50 years, like in a Chinese odyssey? Bullshit. I'm dying of laughter. Sophie has been on countless blind dates, and has had numerous boyfriends over the years. Sophie's every boyfriend is legendary. The reason for her breakup with her last boyfriend was that he didn't know what Haagen-Dazs was. The breakup before that was even funnier. The guy wasn't a local, he came to see Sophie, and the two went shopping and had dinner. Passing by a shopping mall, the man said, wow, this city actually has such a huge small commodity market. Sophie went back and broke up with him without saying a word. I looked at Sophie's light eyeliner, curled eyelashes, and meticulous foundation. The girl who used to find even applying sunscreen a hassle in college is now a sophisticated woman. As I recalled the blind date Sophie had just left, I suddenly remembered her boyfriend from college. The boy wasn't particularly handsome, but he wore glasses and had a very refined air. He was indeed a talented man. He played the piano exceptionally well, was a regular performer at every party, and even had his own band, enjoying immense popularity. He had Sophie, a vibrant and youthful girl, completely captivated. Every night, she would fall asleep listening to love songs he wrote, and in the summer, when she bought a watermelon, she would take half for herself and half for him, cutting it up and delivering it to him. I heard that after graduation, the boy went to make his way in the world, while Sophie stayed here, constantly going on blind dates and falling in love. I didn't ask Sophie if she had forgotten him. If she had, why would she keep going on blind dates with men who wear glasses? But if she hadn't forgotten him, why would she keep falling in love? Sophie took a sip of coffee and said softly, Amy, that's it. You and Jack both ended up like this. What can I still believe in? The longer I'm out of school, the more I realize the world isn't quite what I imagined. This applies to work, friendships, and especially romantic relationships. She always thought there was still such a happy couple in the world, always thought that even if everyone else broke up, these two would still be together. But now, even the story of Dai and Shoji is gone, what can she still believe in? After listening, I remained silent. In fact, I also wanted to ask Jack why he stayed. For the first few years after I went abroad, I dreamed of coming back to him. In my dreams, I would relive those memories over and over again. That summer night, the moon in the sky was almost transparent, gleaming with a pale light. The delicate leaves swayed in the wind. Under the sycamore tree outside the dormitory building, he had carried my water bottle for me countless times, waited for me to go to study countless times, and tenderly kissed my forehead under the tree before coaxing me, go upstairs and go to sleep. That night, his hands were in his pockets, the sweltering wind ruffling the hem of his shirt. He said, Amy, you can't be so selfish. In the quiet night, his cool voice struck my heart. I ran upstairs, desperately wiping away my tears with the back of my hand. I regretted that he hadn't gone far away, and I also regretted my impulsiveness. But as time went by, all those questions became unspeakable. 5 years ago, I could have chosen not to go, but I didn't stay. I could have chosen to come back during those 5 years, but I didn't have the courage. There is something in this world called the past. Once it's gone, you can never go back. That person, he waited for you so generously. He was yours to begin with. But you chose not to accept him, so don't regret it. Sophie thought for a moment, then asked casually, Honey, to be honest, what was it like to see Jack? Looking into her sly eyes, I shook my head and said, Really, I've searched for him 1,000 times. Then suddenly I turned around, I glanced at the gossipy face opposite me and sighed, that person still looks down on me. Sophie opened her eyes wide and yelled, Get out. She got up, pinched my cheek, and jingled her car keys, Let's go, I'll take you home. I laughed. I thought to myself, life is truly amazing that I know someone like Lily, and that I could become such a close friend with Sophie. I think everyone has a different attitude towards relationships. For example, Lily, letting go might be a kind of happiness. For example, Sophie, unable to let go, seeks warmth in one embrace after another. For example, me, smiling on the outside, but with an unhealable pain in my heart. How many people fall in love with the wrong person because of loneliness, and how many people are lonely for life because of falling in love with the wrong person? Many years later, I still think about how things came about with Jack. When did we meet? When did we become close? And when did we get together? In short, it all boils down to 2 words, fate. The first thing to do upon entering university, military training. I'm a lazy person and extremely reluctant to go. I can't understand how military training even exists in this world. Why do we have to do it again after junior high, and then again in college? On that sweltering midday, all the freshmen wore thick camouflage uniforms to the main playground to sign in. That day was the largest gathering since I entered the school, all the departments were there. People who knew each other and those who didn't were chattering away. Boys stood fanning themselves with their hats while admiring the pretty girls, and girls adjusted their hair to make sure they looked good before joining a group to look for handsome guys. People who don't know me might think I'm a bit dull, but deep down I'm a real goofball. We quickly became close in the dorm, standing together and talking about handsome guys. Sophie noticed it first and whispered, Look, that guy standing over there. The other 3 pairs of eyes quickly swept over in unison. Sophie's taste was indeed excellent, he was undeniably handsome. The boy leaned against the old camphor tree, clutching his camouflage hat in one hand and a piece of paper in the other, his body turned to the side. The dazzling sunlight filtered through the dappled leaves, casting dappled patterns on his yellow-green camouflage uniform, yet he appeared lush and refreshingly beautiful. A group of boys were standing on the top floor of the dormitory building looking down, when one of them shouted, "Hey bro, come look at the pretty girls." We could hear it clearly from downstairs, and we burst out laughing. These people are probably juniors or seniors in college. A male voice said, "TCH, dressed like that, what kind of beauties are they?" I looked at my clothes, and they were really terrible. They were not only ugly but also rough, making me feel like I was wearing a rag. Another male voice said, "You don't understand. A woman who can still look beautiful at this time is a true beauty." I'm dying of laughter, what a brilliant theory. Similarly, someone who can still look handsome dressed like that is a true handsome guy. Looking at that person again, he really was different from the other boys. I don't know why, but I had a strange feeling. My roommate asked, "Who is he?" Sophie said, He, I saw him on the day I registered." "You didn't know, did you? He's the class monitor of Engineering Mechanics Class 1, his name is Jack." I was standing behind him watching him sign his name. Wow, his handwriting was so beautiful. I shook my leg, squinted, and looked every bit the female hooligan. I bet I'll go up and chat him up, and see if he pays any attention to me. Their young faces radiated youthful energy. Sophie glanced at me sideways. "How do I know you didn't just go up there pretending to ask for directions? It only counts if you get the phone number, and you have to talk for 10 minutes. I thought this woman was really difficult to deal with, but I couldn't take back what I'd said, so I just said loudly, "No problem." They walked towards the camphor tree. Jack, many years later, I still laugh when I think back to that version of myself. So arrogant and overbearing, yet so naive. The me now could never do that. I can never go back. As I approached, a gentle breeze ruffled his hair, and a faint scent of soap filled the air, like the smell of clothes my mother had washed when I was a child. This guy is really something. In this sweltering heat, unlike the other boys who were flushed and covered in sweat, he stood there looking at the roster with his eyes downcast. The closer I got, the more I wanted to laugh. I stepped on the old tree's shadow, patted him on the shoulder, and shouted, "Jack." The man looked up. His bright, large eyes gave him a somewhat baby-faced appearance, but this was well concealed by his high, straight nose and handsome facial features. The boy probably frowned at being called out like that. He paused when he saw the newcomer, lowered the paper he was holding, and the wind quickly lifted the hem of the paper, making a snap-snap sound. He smirked, his large eyes sparkling with amusement, and asked, "Amy, what are you planning to do?" I burst out laughing. Yes, we knew each other. Although I wasn't sure at first, they really were having an affair where they were desk mates for half a year in junior high. You know, back then Jack was like a little girl, quiet and well-behaved, and all the teachers adored him. My affair with Jack was based on a long-standing friendly relationship. I would come to school every morning to copy his homework, and I would buy him cold drinks during PE class. I would read comics during class while he kept watch. But classmates, please don't think that Jack is an obedient child. To give a simple example, I copied his biology homework. The topic was female reproductive organs ______. While copying, I was fighting with the chubby boy behind me for the eraser, and before I knew it, I had written the answer to the next question. When the homework was corrected and returned, my answer had a big X on it, with a huge question mark next to it. I compared my answer with Jack's, and Jack laughed so hard he almost fell over. "I thought that was what you thought." Bullshit, I want to swear. This person must have seen it when they collected the notebooks, and didn't even tell me. Or, what will my biology teacher think of me? This is probably the most ridiculous joke that teacher has ever heard all day. There are many more things like this. Jack is a quiet person, but he'll occasionally play a prank on me. What infuriated me even more was that one time, I was reading a comic and finally got to the last scene. It was such a beautiful scene. But then, something unpleasant happened. The person next to me, seeing me swooning over, couldn't help but lean over and glance at the comic, then casually remarked, "Amy, so all you do all day is read this kind of stuff?" My fragile heart was triggered by his gaze. What's wrong? What's wrong? It's just a woman in bed and a man sitting on the edge, right? It's just a woman wearing a thin nightgown with her shoulders exposed and a man wearing pants with his chest exposed, right? What's wrong with that? What's impure about it? Even so, Jack identified me as a delinquent when I was 13 years old. So, the affair between the two was never-ending. Until 6 months later, Jack moved to another school district and transferred schools. The two people, who lived in the same city, never met again. So when I suddenly connected the handsome young man standing there with my childhood deskmate, who was prettier than any girl, I felt quite pleased. I couldn't help but joke with Sophie and the others, not even knowing that he would remember me. Jack did indeed remember me when he saw the dimple on my right cheek. That mushroom-haired, goofy-looking girl was now standing in front of him, her eyes gleaming with cunning, shaking her head. He suddenly remembered his childhood. The drooling face that said, "Copying is the only thing that matters, class monitor. Can I borrow your homework?" The big head buried in the desk reading comics. The chubby hand stretched out in front of him after PE class. A round packet of tissues in her palm, she said, "Class monitor, please accept this." I was her desk mate for only half a year, but it was really funny. I was delighted to see someone I knew and exclaimed, "What a coincidence. We are at the same school again. Which department are you in?" Jack glanced at the increasingly crowded playground in the distance, engineering mechanics. After all, we've all grown up and are no longer the playful classmates we used to sit next to. Boys and girls have long since become different. I said, I'm an English major. I didn't understand what engineering mechanics was. Science has always been mysterious and unfathomable. Looking at Jack standing there with a faint smile, she was a little unsure what to say. Suddenly remembering her mission, she said, "By the way, what's your phone number? Let's keep in touch." Jack recited a number, took out his phone, and said, "You can call it." I called, and Jack hung up after seeing the vibration. I wondered how long 10 minutes actually was, so I tried to start a conversation. "Where do you live now?" Jack put his phone back in his pocket. "I moved. I live in the east side of the city now." I kept trying to make conversation. "Oh, that's so far. Does your mom work there?" I was practically rolling my eyes, but I had no other choice. Jack nodded and hummed in agreement. I glanced at the three gossipy women in the distance with their eyes wide open, and had no choice but to continue. "By the way, do you remember Ms. Lin, our junior high school homeroom teacher? She got married a couple of years ago, and had a baby this year." After saying that, he looked at Jack, whose nose was covered in sweat, his mind racing, trying to think of what to say next. Before she could even speak, Jack raised a wicked glint in his eye. "Amy, are you guys making a bet?" He gestured towards Sophie and the others. I broke out in a cold sweat. Good heavens, this guy's still got it right. He chuckled and said, "Bye-bye. Get out of here." Just kidding, getting pranked by Jack is really unbearable. Who knows if his pranking skills have reached their peak over the past 10 years. It scurried back to Sophie and the others with its tail between its legs. Sophie asked, "So fast? Were you chased back?" I said, "What? Do you want my phone number or not?" My roommate screamed, "They are coming so soon." No way. I took a few steps, then turned back triumphantly. "That's right. Sophie patted my arm and asked, "Tell me honestly, what's your relationship with me?" I was short of breath and said softly, "He was my desk mate for half a year." He was instantly knocked down by several hands simultaneously. Amidst our playful banter, I was unaware that someone was standing under the shade of a tree, calling out my name while glancing at my retreating figure, watching my ponytail sway with each light step as I walked further and further away. As if it were only natural, I started visiting him frequently afterward, and even dragged him along to study with me during exams. Whenever he had free time after studying, he would help me carry my water bottle, and at the end of the month, I even extorted him into treating me to dinner. One evening, I went to get some porridge. A girl standing a few people behind me whispered, "Look, that's Jack's girlfriend, the heartthrob from the engineering department." My hand trembled so much while I was getting my food that I almost fell. Staggering back to the dorm with my bowl, I told Sophie, "Damn it. Someone said I was Jack's girlfriend while I was getting food." Sophie was looking at a magazine, not even looking up. "Isn't that right?" I sat down and thought about it for a long time, and realized that this problem was very serious. No wonder I didn't sell well in college. While all the other girls in my dorm have suitors, I'm the only one left single. No wonder, no wonder. This is a very important issue. Someone has seriously affected my hopes for a beautiful romance during my 4 years of university. I got so angry just thinking about it that I rolled up my sleeves and strode out to find someone to compensate me for the losses, and to sever all ties with him. Before dinner, Jack was working at the student union. Without thinking, I headed straight for the university activity center. Jack had just locked his office door, jingled his keys, and was walking out when he turned around and saw me standing behind him. He sighed, "Do I have to treat you to dinner again?" I slammed my hand on the ping-pong table outside the office, wincing in pain. It hurt so much, I had to bear it. I shouted, "They all say I'm your girlfriend," with absolute conviction. After saying it, I realized that what I said was wrong. What was all that about? Jack, hands in his pockets, watched me lash out and laughed. He reached out his long, slender hand and pinched my chin. "So, what do you say?" Her voice was soft yet commanding. Looking into his large, dark eyes, brimming with laughter, and his raised eyebrows exuding endless charm, I answered loudly without saying a word, "Yes." Jack squinted, smiled again, and took my hand. His warm palm slid over my chubby fingers. He said, "Let's go eat," leading the dazed person out of the activity center. It wasn't until I sat down in front of the steaming bowl of red bean soup that I finally figured out what had happened. Damn, I'm totally smitten. My God, what kind of man is he? I glanced at a classmate leisurely sipping his soup, and then at the stares around me. It turned out this had been going on for a long time, and I hadn't known until now, simply because I was so engrossed in spending time with him that I hadn't noticed. Okay, I guess I do like him after all. I slowly began to drink the red bean soup, a happy smile playing on my lips. Jack, everything between us seems to have fallen into place too easily. I don't know when I started liking you, or when we actually got together. It all just happened in a flash. So much so that in the end, I took it for granted that you were mine, and of course, I belonged to you too. Perhaps that's why we were so immature and impulsive when we broke up, failing to cherish each other or try to hold on. At the end of March, the homebody finally ventured out. I got up early in the morning just to eat some KFC's signature fried dough sticks, the more direct reason being that I hadn't adjusted to the time difference. There weren't many people at KFC in the morning. A couple who looked like students came in to order. The boy gave the girl the money and said, "I want a breakfast burger, you can order whatever you want." Then he went over and sat down. As I ate breakfast, I suddenly remembered the days when Jack and I would order food together. We were already together then, and I loved eating junk food, but Jack didn't like it at all. Every time we came, he wouldn't let me order too much, saying it was bad for my health, like an old man. The two stood under the menu to order, and he asked, "What would you like to eat?" I got excited. A big bag of fries, chicken wings, chicken burgers. He said, "If I eat chicken wings, I won't eat fries." I said, "How could you do that?" I have a classmate who always says, "Miss, one of everything," whenever her boyfriend comes with her. Jack looked at me and said, "Amy, do you think I'm crazy?" Then he turned to the waiter and said, "Excuse me, could you change the fries to a vegetable salad?" A smile made the waiter dizzy and he quickly turned around to get the salad. He took the plate, turned around, and raised a delicate eyebrow. "Eat, or not eat?" "Are you kidding me? How could I not eat?" I immediately followed. Looking back, I was so naive. I listened to what others said and compared it to my own love life. Little did I know that youthful feelings are priceless and incomparable. I didn't think much of it then, but looking back, I realized that everything that person did has been etched in my heart. Vivian called and asked me to meet her, saying she had something for me. I happily asked, "You're not going to return my wedding gift money, are you?" "That's too kind of you." Vivian yelled, "You're dreaming. Come on, we are waiting for you at 2 p.m. at Yiswa." Soft music played softly in the tea house, with old English songs lingering among the tables. Each table was separated by a bamboo curtain, and small teacups were placed between them, the tea inside shimmering with a clear green light, the wrinkled tea leaves swirling at the bottom. I've noticed I've been arriving late a lot lately. When I got there, I found Vivian already sitting in her seat waiting for me. I wasn't very close to Vivian. We were okay in junior high, but after graduation we just kept in touch, so it was a bit strange that she said she had something for me. Vivian handed me a box, square in shape, and it felt a little heavy in my hand. She said, "Jack asked me to give this to you." When I heard Jack's name, my eyelids twitched. I didn't know why. So I just chuckled and said, "Thank you. I should at least show some politeness." Vivian said, "You're welcome." Seeing that I was looking down and not saying anything, she thought for a moment and then said, "When Jack transferred away, more than half of the girls in our class were heartbroken." I was stunned, then realized she was referring to Jack transferring schools in junior high. Jack stopped coming in the second semester that year, and the teacher only then told him he'd transferred. The whole class gasped, including me. I'd thought he'd at least told me, his deskmate, about the transfer. After all, I'd been renting his homework from him for a long time. Whose work will she copy from now on? That was the first serious question that popped into my head. But even without Jack, I could still borrow homework to copy, just of lower quality. You know, when Jack was around, my notebooks were full of excellent grades. Oh well, as long as I had something to copy, that was enough, so I quickly forgot about it and focused on eating, sleeping, and playing. These days, even 26-year-old adults rarely think about someone, let alone a 13-year-old. Jack's name gradually faded from my memory, and faded from everyone else's. After chatting idly for a while, Vivian checked her watch, picked up her bag, and said, "My husband's here to pick me up, I'm off." I nodded and smiled, "Bye-bye, happy wedding." One person, one box, staring blankly. I sat there for a while, still very curious, and opened the box with a pounding heart. Just like every time I received a gift from him, I felt anticipation, nervousness, and scolded myself for being an idiot. I'm still like this after all these years. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a hollowed-out Tibetan silver wine bottle with a blackish luster, and openwork patterns that rubbed against the palm of the hand. I recognized this wine bottle because it was the first gift I gave him. That was also the first time I gave a gift to a boy. At that time, Jack was participating in a provincial design competition, and was staying up all night every day. Sophie and I saw this Tibetan silver wine bottle while shopping. We thought it was exquisite and cute, but the price was also quite exquisite. Under the shopkeeper's smooth talk, I heard him say, "It can bring peace and good luck." Without saying a word, I took out my living expenses for the month and even borrowed money from Sophie. Sophie said as she took out her money, "You idiot, who's ever been so nice to a man from the start?" I didn't listen, I just hugged the bottle and laughed like an idiot. That evening, I went to Jack's apartment building and gave him the bottle. He laughed and said, "Silly boy, I haven't even won an award yet, and you're already giving me a present." I said, "Stop talking." Sophie also called me stupid. Even if I'm not stupid, she'll call me stupid. That night, nestled in his arms, listening to his pounding heartbeat, his warm arms encircling my waist, I grinned from ear to ear. It was all worth the money. As a result, Jack gave me the money to pay Sophie back. Thinking about it, I felt like a failure. I bought him something and he still had to pay for it. But he said I could mooch off him for the next month, so I stopped thinking about it. Jack still won the prize in the competition. Tom sneaked over and said, "Jack's wife, did you buy that Tibetan silver wine bottle on Jack's table?" I nodded. Tom said, no wonder, with a sly smile, and strode away. What I didn't know was that Jack would later develop a liking for Tibetan ornaments. So many years have passed, I can't even remember what this bottle looks like. Today, with this bottle in my hands again, I suddenly feel a little dazed. I wonder why Jack returned it to me. When he saw this bottle, did he, like me, recall old dreams? What kind of expression did he have as he stroked the bottle? A Cantonese song played in the tea room. I didn't know which singer it was, but her voice was warm and gentle. She sang, "Remembering the past often brings me joy, thinking of old times brings tears to my eyes. Life is like a dream, who can predict what will happen? A stone may one day become jade." I hardly remember any of the arguments we had in the past, and I've slowly forgotten the reasons for each tear. In the end, even the reasons for our stubborn breakup have faded with time, leaving only his smile, the way he called me idiot, and how he remembered everything about me. As time goes by, the bad things about that person become increasingly unclear, but their good deeds remain in our hearts. Perhaps this is the wonderful thing about life. It allows you to easily remember the good in others and forget their bad. Later, since it was still early, Sophie called and said she was in the city center on business, and wanted to meet me. I knew I had recently displeased Sophie, so I immediately rode my bicycle over when she summoned me. When Sophie saw me, she pulled on her cart basket, pointed to the box, and asked, "What's in here?" I told him the truth. Sophie said, "When did Jack become so carefree?" I was taken aback. That's true, it's been hundreds of years since the old story, yet Jack still remembered to return it. How come I never knew he was such a noble person? I thought about it and wondered if I should return everything he gave me when I got back, throw up all the food, and if I couldn't throw it up, just sell it for cash. But then I thought it was too awful. Wasn't Jack just asking for trouble? So this proves that you shouldn't speak ill of others behind their backs. In that fit of anger, I stepped on the pedal, and my trouser leg got caught in the bike chain. When bad luck strikes, there's no stopping it. I got carried away and thought I'd gained weight at home, so I decided to go out for a bike ride today. I even cleaned up my old bike before going out, but who knew this embarrassing thing would happen? I couldn't do it myself, so Sophie had to bend down and, while scolding me, use her supposedly white-collar hands to pull the chain. Luckily, it wasn't too tangled, and she pulled it out by backing the bike a little. I chuckled, my eyes crinkling, and patted Sophie's shoulder as she wiped her hands with a napkin. In my entire life, only two people have ever helped me pull up my pants like this, one a woman, and the other a man. Sophie glanced at me sideways. Don't tell me it's Jack. I'm laughing, it really is Jack. In college, whenever I didn't have classes in the afternoon, I would ride my bike home, and then ride back the next morning. I had barely ridden my bike to the school gate when my pants got caught in the chain. I struggled with the chain for ages, but the tangles only got worse. Then I received a frantic call from Jack, and I knew I was in deep trouble. This morning's class was the only one Jack and I had ever attended together in our 4 years of college. All he could hear on the phone was the noise from the classroom. Jack gritted his teeth and yelled, "Amy, just stay there and don't move." His voice was fierce, but it reassured me, so I really didn't move. I pushed off the ground with one foot and placed the other on the pedal, pretending to be watching the passing vehicles. Cyclists would look at me, and I would look at them in return. A moment later, Jack came running over. Without saying a word to me, the first thing he did was squat down and fiddle with the chain. I was afraid he would curse at me, so I didn't dare to speak and just stayed still, obediently like a piece of wood. The distant chimes of the school clock tower rang out. I looked down at him and saw only his pale blue hair whirl and his thick back, undulating with the panting from running. Pedestrians came and went, all turning around curiously to take a look. A handsome young man was leaning over the bicycle, intently fiddling with the chain. A young girl gripped the handlebars, her face slightly flushed. I noticed that his fair fingers were stained black with the machine oil from the chain. And his nails were filthy. I quickly said, "Never mind, go to class first. I'll come over next period." Jack, without even looking up, said, "Stop talking nonsense and back up the car." I had no choice but to shut up and obediently back the car up. There was a slight movement at the hem of my pants, and Jack frowned, looking up at me earnestly. "Do you want the pants, or the car?" She smiled, revealing half a dimple. I was startled and immediately said, "I want the pants too, and the car too." I was as determined as a soldier facing death. In that instant, I missed the sly smile in Jack's eyes. A few minutes later, he pulled up his trouser leg, revealing a large, greasy black patch. In fact, his hands weren't much better off. I took out some tissues and wrapped them up for him. He wiped his hands and casually said, "It's not clean enough. I'll go wash them at the sink. You go to class first." That morning, I stood at the school gate, watching the morning light scatter in circles on his straight back as he slowly walked away. That boy and the morning light of that day became an unforgettable scene in my memory. After that, no one else would so naturally squat down, extend their dirty hands, and ask me with a smile, "Do you want your pants or your bike?" Ha, there's another woman besides her, Lady Sophie. As I watched Sophie bend over, I suddenly remembered Jack. It turns out that memory from that time still lay perfectly intact in my heart. I thought I'd forgotten it, but it was simply because nothing or no one had touched it. I thanked Sophie and carefully rode my bike home. All the way, I kept thinking about Jack. All the memories came flooding back. I didn't understand why someone as decisive and efficient as him would ask for a gift back after so long. If it were to be repaid, there was time even after the breakup that year. I really find it strange. In a flash, I remembered an 8 p.m. drama series. After breaking up, the female lead brought a bunch of things to the male lead's house, crying and saying, "Here you go, I'll give you everything back," while the male lead just stared blankly at the things. In crucial moments, I'm not stupid. I think you, Jack, are just looking for trouble. You insist on returning something to me, but you won't even come to see me. Aren't you deliberately flirting with me? Do people still act like this after a breakup? After a breakup, saying things like, "I want to return your things," or "Give me back my things," are just excuses now. If you truly hate someone, you would have burned everything they gave you long ago, out of sight, out of mind. Why waste so much effort and breath insisting on returning it? Saying "return it" or "go back" is just an excuse, the only excuse to see them again after the breakup. My lips twitched. "Jack, you're so cheesy." But I, Amy, am not one to be trifled with either. This time, you're the one who flirted with me. Many years later, when I reflected on my painful experience, I realized it profoundly proved the saying, impulsiveness is the devil. Hey, don't laugh, this is someone's painful history. I've found that every time I get impulsive with Jack, nothing good ever comes of it. My first impulsive act was rushing to Jack and asking him the silly question, "Everyone says I'm your girlfriend," only to be turned around and have my identity confirmed by him. My second impulsive act was breaking up with Jack and impulsively leaving the country. My third impulsive act is today. There's a saying, green are your robes, deep is my longing, but don't rush to sigh that it's vulgar. We are not talking about that line, we are talking about what follows. Even if I don't go to you, will you not come to me? Even if I don't go to see you, will you not come to see me? Means, hey, you little brat, if I don't go to see you, you won't come to see me. That's all I can think about right now. Since I still can't forget Jack, since Jack's destructive power has been proven to be so formidable. And since Jack has taken the initiative to issue the challenge, how can I not gladly accept? I parked my bicycle on the side of the road and started dialing Jack's number on my phone. Don't ask me how I'm sure it's still this number. I dialed it countless times when I was abroad. Hearing that familiar voice, I reflexively hung up. Eventually, fearing he'd get too bothered and change his number, I started calling only once in a long while, and I could still get through. Sometimes, I resent Jack. Back then, he forced me to memorize his number, and he would suddenly ask me for it every time we met, so much so that I knew his number by heart. I might not even remember my own parents' numbers, but I could remember his. I complained about why I had to write down his number, I could just save it on my phone. But he said, what if your phone gets stolen or runs out of battery someday? You need someone to come and rescue you. I had no choice but to memorize it obediently. It wasn't until after we broke up and I went abroad that I suddenly realized what had happened and hated myself for keeping his number in my head. Even deleting it from my phone couldn't stop me, I still remembered it. I kept deleting and adding it back, adding and deleting again, but I still couldn't forget him. The phone rang a few times before being answered. He said, "Hello." A clear voice reached my ears across space and time. In an instant, the phone burned, and I reflexively wanted to hang up. The person didn't speak or hang up. A faint dusty smell filled the air as I inhaled it. After a while, the man said, "I received the item." His tone was affirmative. They didn't say their names, but they knew it was me. I grunted in response, then realized I'd been so full of bravado just now, this wouldn't do, boosting the enemy's morale while diminishing my own. I said, "Where are you now?" "I'm coming to find you." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. I said, "Hello." The person said, "Jingyang Mingcheng, West Building, 602, and hung up. I didn't expect him to be home. But at this point, even if it's a tiger's den, I'm willing to brave it. I locked the car and hailed a taxi. The taxi driver drove very steadily. In the car, I kept thinking about how I was a modern woman, someone who had broadened my horizons, and how I needed to focus on my goals. I was 26. How many more years could I afford to go through all this? Since I was always going to be entangled with him, since I couldn't forget him no matter how hard I tried, I might as well go find him, take care of Comrade Jack, and bring things to a close. And so, I took the third step in her history of impulsiveness. As the saying goes, once the wound heals, the pain is forgotten, and that's absolutely true. Standing at Jack's door, I mustered my courage and rang the doorbell. The door clicked open. Jack rested one hand on the doorframe and the other in his pocket. He wore dark brown velvet casual pants and a narrow V-neck sweater that revealed his smooth neck. His collarbone extended straight down to his shoulders, and his slightly concave bust line flowed straight down from the wide neckline. He was working from home, wearing thin-rimmed glasses. His hair, unlike the stiff style he had worn last time, was soft and cascading down his bangs, which added to his lazy and childlike appearance. With his arms crossed, he looked at me through his glasses, as if to say, "What brings you here?" I'm immune to those threatening looks by now. I've gotten used to being intimidated once, twice, and besides, I have a mission to complete. She grabbed his clothes, she tried to grab the collar but missed, and instead pulled on his stomach, turning his perfectly good sweater into a ridiculous angle. I looked him straight in the eye and declared, "I want to live with you." "Yes, I've thought about it. Jack and I aren't in a TV drama. He works at a design company, and I stay at home. Our lives can never intersect again. And I can't start over with him from the beginning of our relationship, there's too much familiarity, too many scars. But I also can't bear the thought of him getting married, starting a family with someone else, surrounded by children. Just thinking about it makes my heart ache." My only tactic was to dominate him and insist on being with him. I was unwilling to give up, so I figured I might as well just go for it after all. He was the one who flirted with me. I always thought my brain was unusual. It turns out, Jack's brain structure is even more extraordinary. The person's clear eyes sparkled with light, appearing even more translucent and captivating behind the thin lenses. He grinned, revealing teeth so white they shone, dazzling my eyes. "I don't live with people, I only marry them." He raised his chin, speaking with extreme pride, but a seductive smile played on his lips. I froze on the spot. Don't men always say, "I don't marry people, I just live with them"? This Jack is really out of his mind. I remembered something I saw online a few days ago. Cohabitation is like renting a house, while marriage is like buying a house. Living in a rented house feels like stealing, but living in a bought house makes you feel like a landlord, able to do whatever you want. I think Jack is definitely much smarter than me. He leaned against the door, staring at me intently. Suddenly, I turned and walked out. He seemed a little anxious, grabbed my wrist, and asked coldly, "Where are you going? Is it going to leave his life again?" He tightened his grip, determined not to let go no matter what. I looked up at him and said, "Go home and get your household registration book." This time, it was he who was stunned. I waved my hand and said, "I'll bring my household registration booklet tomorrow, and come see you again." He glanced at the clock on the wall, 4:45, grabbed the car keys by the door, and pulled her hand. "We're still in time. I'll take you home today." My mouth dropped open. Is anyone in such a rush? I'm not even in a hurry anymore. Jack came down the steps and looked at her, a smile playing on his lips. "Tomorrow is April 1st. I won't object if you want to get married on April Fool's Day." After saying that, he put his hands in his pockets and walked downstairs step by step. I'm thinking, getting married on April Fool's Day, what would the date be on the marriage certificate? Maybe I shouldn't. I need to hurry downstairs and go home to get my household registration book. As it turns out, 5 years later, I still obediently fell into Mr. Shaoji's clutches. I got into Jack's SUV, and just looking at the car, I knew he was a pragmatist. It offered great value for money. And rightly so. When has he ever made a losing deal? The two remained silent the entire way. Streets, pedestrians, houses, and tall buildings flashed past them. I closed my eyes briefly. This city holds so many memories for us, an intersection, a bench, a bus stop, where we've all paused. Every time I pass a familiar place, I stop and stare blankly, grinning at myself like a fool. I was a little surprised that Jack was still there and still had his phone number. "Jack, are you like me, still reluctant to leave this city? Even though it's sad, even though you'll think about it, you still can't bear to leave, because it's the only place where you can commemorate our shared memories." I turned my head to the side and secretly watched him drive. He rested one hand on the window, and the other effortlessly gripped the steering wheel. His slender, fair hand rested on the wheel, and his eyes were slightly narrowed behind his glasses, making him incredibly sexy. I sighed, but it's this kind of man that I still can't forget, and now I'm actually walking with him on the road to the red carpet, no, to the grave. He ignored me, not even glancing at me, his eyes fixed on the road ahead as he drove. The car was filled with a heavy, oppressive atmosphere, so quiet it was almost suffocating. I thought about it and decided to ask, Jack, when you were with me, did you ever think about marrying me? Over the years, many people have told me not to take men's promises too seriously, as they are often just empty promises. You remember sweet words, only to regret them later. Jack is a man who rarely makes promises, and most of the time we are together we are arguing. He's never talked to me about marriage, but now that we've come this far, I just suddenly wanted to ask. The scent of air freshener wafted into my nostrils, and I gripped the handle of my handbag, then gripped it again and let go. He said, yes. I paused, sitting up straight and not daring to move. He added, back then, I was around 20 years old, and no guy would seriously think about that kind of thing. But there were definitely moments when I thought you were exceptionally beautiful. He turned his face away and continued driving, but his fingers gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles sticking out. I was dizzy listening to him, but a sweet joy welled up inside me. I believe what Jack said. After a moment, I took a breath and asked, when is a moment? Just when I thought he wouldn't answer, his deep voice slowly broke through. He said, that Valentine's Day. He spoke very quickly, and when he finished, he pursed his lips, didn't look at her, and didn't say anything more. I was taken aback, and instantly knew what he was referring to. That year was the first time I spent Valentine's Day with someone. Unfortunately, he had a design exam, so I had to wait for him in my dorm. When he returned, it was already 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening. The two of us sneaked out, but there weren't any flower vendors left, so we ended up taking a walk in the public square near the school. That night, there were an unusually large number of bright stars. I leaned against him, and the two of us walked backwards, gazing at the starry sky, and spent the most unforgettable Valentine's Day of our lives. When I travel abroad, the air quality is good and the starry sky is exceptionally clear, but I am not amazed. Instead, when I look up, I think of that night sky and the two silly people there. Inside the car, I kept my head down, while he stared at the traffic ahead, saying nothing. We were both thinking the same thing. If things had continued like this back then, would we be married by now? Maybe we'd have adorable children calling him Dad and me Mom. Neither he nor I knew the answer. Fortunately, life has its twists and turns, and it's never too late. After I went upstairs to get my household registration booklet, he said, you can move in here. Take whatever you can. I was taken aback. His sharp eyes snapped at me. I thought, that makes sense, married people usually live together. At 5:20, the two sat there filling out the application form, only to discover something. They hadn't had a premarital checkup. I stared wide-eyed at Mr. Shoujie. I've finally caught him red-handed. I've finally caught him making a mistake in his life. Mr. Shoujie flicked his pen, spread his hands, and his big eyes were filled with a bright smile. I'm a newbie, please give me some pointers. As it turns out, Mr. Jack always represented the side of truth. Jack took the application form to the information desk, asked around, and then came back with a big smile, showing me a set of gleaming white teeth. He said, the Civil Affairs Bureau said that an inspection is not required. I'm not having it. How come even getting married is your decision? She rolled her eyes and said, then you'll regret it. Once sold, our products are non-refundable. Jack leaned against the wall, glanced at me sideways, and said coolly, I don't really expect you to return it. Let's go. One is a handsome man with a smile on his lips, and the other is a woman with an afro and clenched teeth. Step by step, they walk into each other's lives again in the spacious corridor of the Civil Affairs Bureau. We were the last couple. The auntie at the Civil Affairs Bureau looked a bit sullen. I glanced at the clock, 5:30. We were making her leave work, but I really didn't want to get married on April 1st. The older woman asked, Mr. Jack, Miss Amy, are you sure you want to get married? The thought of myself going from Miss Amy to Mrs. Jack made my lips twitch. Marriage is truly a magnificent thing. The two nodded, and the older woman asked again, are you sure you want to get married? I was thinking, do we really not look like married people at all? This woman has certainly seen it all. While I was still thinking, I heard the person next to me answer, yes. The voice was as steady as ever, but the soft lines of his face were now tense. And his fingers were clenched at his sides, with his knuckles clearly white. I gently placed my hand on his fist, nodded, and smiled, yes. At that moment, I became his wife. With two loud thumps, two large red stamps appeared, along with two bright red booklets. My life and his were now intertwined. I looked up at him, and he smiled back at me, his sparkling eyes gleaming. Perhaps in the future they will still quarrel and threaten to separate, but at least for this moment, their hearts are closely intertwined, and they believe that each other is their one and only for life. The most unforgettable thing in a teenager's life is the college entrance examination. The most unforgettable thing in a 20s is getting married. For the newlyweds exchanging rings, I envision myself cooking delicious meals and waiting for him to come home. He wants to work hard and earn money so I can live a comfortable life, at least feeling that he married the right person. In the days to come, perhaps they'll both gain weight, and at some point suddenly wonder if this is how life will be. Perhaps one of them will suddenly leave, and they'll no longer remember the excitement of their wedding night. But at least in this moment, they are wholeheartedly devoted to each other, trusting and cherishing one another, hand in hand, facing the sea, where spring is in full bloom. As I walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau building, the sky was a clear blue, the wind brushed against my eyes and brows, and the tender white magnolia blossoms swayed gently on the branches. I want to call my mom to share the good news. I can't believe I just did something this big on a whim. I don't dare tell my dad. I'll tell my mom first to calm my nerves. She's always nagging me about marriage anyway. My hands trembled as I dialed the number. My mom answered after a moment, but I didn't dare talk to her right away, so I just rambled on about this and that, even mentioning the dog that Aunt Huang downstairs keeps. I glanced at Jack, who was leaning against the SUV, looking away, as if he hadn't heard what I was saying. I was so annoyed, but I still chuckled and asked, Mom, what if I suddenly get married one day? Without a second thought, my mom said, sever all ties. I broke out in a cold sweat. I glanced at Jack, who seemed completely unfazed. My mom immediately asked again, what did you do? I thought my mom was quick-witted, so I quickly said, no, isn't whirlwind marriage all the rage these days? I felt Jack turn his head and frown at me. Mom said, you dare? My heart sank, it seemed like there was really no hope. In a last-ditch effort, I said, didn't you always say I should find a partner? My mom yelled, I didn't ask you to get married right away. Don't your parents think about what good options they can find? And started talking on the other end of the phone. My scalp tingled, and I quickly made an excuse to hang up the phone. Looking up, he saw Jack staring sharply at him, a glint of light flashing from his thin glasses. I was a little embarrassed, so I flicked the notebook around and chuckled. So this is what a Chinese marriage certificate looks like. Jack sneered, raising a handsome eyebrow. Amy, tell me, what other marriage certificates have you obtained? Before I could even say anything, bang. I got in the car and slammed the door shut. When I saw Jack laughing like that, I knew I'd said the wrong thing again. Clutching that legendary unblessed little book, I climbed into the car with my afro. The car was silent. I thought to myself, I have to put out the fire I started. Just a moment ago, this guy was all lovey-dovey about marrying me. How come he's completely different now that we have the marriage certificate? People say married men are different, but Jack's change of heart is a bit too fast. As the car drove back to Jingyang City, Jack reversed it with a stern face. I sighed, but still seized the last opportunity and said with a grin, "Little G, don't be angry. You're already sentenced to married imprisonment." As he spoke, he didn't notice that Jack's fingers on the steering wheel trembled slightly. Hearing her call him Shou Jie again today filled him with overwhelming excitement. Jack reached out and pinched my cheek, his big eyes behind his glasses smiling brightly like blooming peach blossoms. "Mrs. Jack, I'm going to work, and we'll pick up some dinner while I'm at it." They left me behind, and the SUV sped away. Jack finally came back before I starved to death. He brought dinner, but neither of us had much of an appetite, so we just ate a little. These two were, after all, a bit reserved. Some people fall in love before marriage, some fall in love after marriage, but they really didn't know which category to fall into. In short, they were neither fish nor fowl. I finished showering and sat on the sofa drying my hair, glancing at Jack's imposing figure, as he grabbed a towel and headed to the shower. Suddenly, a crucial thought occurred to me. Tonight seemed to be the legendary wedding night. As I was staring blankly at the TV, thinking about that embarrassing incident, Jack came out, drying his hair. He was wearing a simple shirt and casual pants, but all I could see were his wet, black hair dripping with water, the fine droplets of water on his beautiful face, his misty eyes, and his fair wrists. A man who could be so handsome. I felt a little embarrassed and shifted my position. Jack, with a towel around his neck, took a sip of water, glanced at me fidgeting, and asked, "What are you doing?" I felt a little embarrassed. I understood the duties of a married woman. Since things had come to this, I could only say, "Well, we are both married now." Jack took the water glass, squinted and smiled. "Amy, come into the room." I gasped. This was way too fast. When did Mr. Jack become more direct than me? Jack pointed her slender finger to the sofa I was sitting on and said, "This one is foldable, I'll sleep here." I was mortified and, feeling utterly embarrassed, grabbed her small bag and hurried into the room. Jack followed her in, grabbed my pillow and blanket, and took his own. Standing by the door, holding the blanket with his back to me, he asked casually, "Amy, did you call me when you were in America?" I sat on the edge of the bed, still recovering from the embarrassment I had just experienced. "Huh?" Jack took a breath and turned around. "I mean, there have been many calls that were called and then hung up." He paused, looked at me. "Was it you who called?" His clear, large eyes were filled with a compelling heat. I realized what he was talking about, and feeling even more embarrassed, I lowered my head and pretended to be busy putting on a pillowcase. Jack smiled and called out, "Amy." I looked up and was struck by his clear eyes. He said, "Remember to lock the door." Seeing my dazed look, he was in a good mood, "So they won't come out and ambush me at night." I was stunned for a moment, then started throwing pillows and cursing. Jack gently closed the door, listening to me grumbling inside. He hadn't heard that chattering sound in 5 years. He slowly suppressed his smile. The light from the incandescent bulb was too dazzling, so he reached out and covered his eyes. Over the past 5 years, he has been receiving calls from unfamiliar, never-repeating numbers. He would answer with a simple hello and hang up. Sometimes the call would be immediately cut off. He had someone check the numbers, and they turned out to be internet numbers. Every time his phone rang, he reflexively checked the number. He hesitated whenever he saw a similar number. He knew it was hers, he was absolutely certain. He wanted to talk to her, but he couldn't bring himself to speak. Sometimes he hated her and wanted to yell at her to stop calling, but it was always just a thought. He was always harsh in words. And so he kept answering her calls, refusing to change his number. Even when his phone was stolen, he rushed to the service center to fix it. He didn't know if she was all right, or why she was calling. Was she having a hard time? Was she being bullied? Was she heartbroken? Was she crying? He couldn't stop thinking about it. He had hated her for acting this way even after they had broken up. But now that she wasn't calling, he was starting to worry. He cursed himself for being so foolish. His moist eyelashes trembled in his warm palms. He could no longer believe this day would come. All expectations, love and hate had been worn down by time. Ideals, beliefs, even people themselves are smoothed out by the years. Today at the Civil Affairs Bureau Registration Office, her short, chubby fingers enveloped his palm, and he reached back to hold her hand, their fingers intertwined. Over the years, he had hated her, resented her, and even considered leaving her, yet he still chose her. Whenever her hand touched his, he would tremble with excitement. In these past 5 years, they could have left each other, but they always came back. He chose to stay, and she chose to hold his hand. Who would have thought that 5 years later, they would feel that same surprise and excitement again? Goodbye, goodbye, I'm just being a jerk again. Regarding marriage, Lily said, people always have to get married. When you reach that age, most people around you are already married, so you just get married when you meet the right person. Sophie said, marriage? He. I just want to try what it's like to not have my period for 10 months. I think that even though Jack and I aren't having a wedding banquet or honeymoon, we are still married, and we should still inform the people who need to be informed. I called Lily, and she gasped on the other end of the line, then said after a long pause, wow, you've got a whirlwind marriage. I chuckled, remembering that Lily didn't know who Jack was. She'd only heard bits and pieces of my mention of this relationship. Girls are strange, even when they are close, they don't know how to bring it up. And when they finally want to, they miss the opportune moment, casually mentioning it's in the past. I called Sophie again, and she suddenly yelled on the other end of the line, raising her voice, you need to explain this properly. I felt embarrassed and could only say that I was inviting Sophie and Lily to dinner. Sophie and Lily, two women who seemed to have no connection whatsoever, met 5 years ago. Their friendship began when they started revealing my secrets to each other. I am naturally oblivious, so as long as they get along peacefully, that's fine. I don't mind being exposed a bit more, since they are both genuinely trying to help me and wouldn't say anything hurtful. In the private room of Boiling Fish Village, all three of us could handle spicy food, and the key was that it was exciting enough. Lily arrived first, and before she even had a chance to sit down, her first words were, show me the photos. Her infatuation was on full display. I was looking down as I texted the private room number to Sophie, without even looking up, what photos? Lily said, wedding photos, groom's photos. I chuckled sheepishly and waved my hand, no. Lily kicked my chair leg. I want to see you alive or dead, so go take some photos. A little while later, Sophie arrived. Sophie worked in the loan center of a bank, and her office job wasn't as comfortable as Lily's, a civil servant's. She had just put her bag down when she looked up and saw me holding a teacup, giving her a fawning smile and saying, serving the people is hard work. Sophie said, bullshit, I work for the IMB. Thinking for a moment, he raised his eyebrows and said, honey, tell me, how come you've gotten involved with that classmate again? During the meal, the three of them grimaced and hissed from the spiciness. Poor me, while eating boiled fish and shredded chicken, my mouth watered from the spiciness, and I was still talking about my marital history. I watched as Lily and Sophie, their faces flushed red from the spiciness, listened intently to me, their eyes wide. And the two women would occasionally burst into laughter. Lily was going home to see her child after dinner. After all, at this age, everyone has their own things to do, and it was already a big favor that she made it to our suddenly arranged date. I saw her out of the private room, and Lily patted my cheek. It's not difficult for couples to get along. A little more trust, a little more physical intimacy, and there won't be any problems. Don't men just want a warm home? I nodded firmly. What this married person said was absolutely right. Lily pushed open the door and turned back. Amy, don't keep things bottled up. If you can't talk to your husband, you can talk to your girlfriends. As I looked at Lily's hair blowing in the wind and her sincere eyes, a strange warmth suddenly welled up in my heart. Love brings sweetness, but friendship brings abundance. Lily hailed a taxi and winked at me before getting in. When are we going to have our wedding photos and wedding ceremony? I'll book a big one for you. I waved to her car, pushed open the door, and the room was filled with the noise of glasses and drinks. Lily really knows me. Although she didn't say why so many things that should have been done weren't, she knew. She worries about me but doesn't ask why. This is an unspoken understanding that has lasted for many years. Thinking back to the days when we were young, squatting on the street picking out stickers, I suddenly sighed at the passage of time. Now, Lily and I often say, I've been looking at your face for over 20 years. Lily says, Amy, I've watched you grow up. Such feelings need no further explanation. Back in the private room, I gasped. Sophie had already ordered drinks, a pitcher of beer, and she was already drinking it. I went back into the hallway and, after some thought, decided to call Jack. Judging from Sophie's expression, she was going to cause a scene tonight. Although my marriage to Jack was truly bizarre, it was only the second day, and I was already disappearing without a trace. Remembering Lily's words, I knew I had to make the call. I sighed, and only then did I realize the difference between married and unmarried people. Leaning against the wall, I called Jack. The phone rang. The elevator at the end of the corridor came up, the doors opened, a group of people came out, a group of people went in, and the doors closed. Jack answered the phone with a calm hello. In the bustling Sichuan restaurant, this sudden calm settled my heart, and my stomach, which had been churning from the spicy food, felt much more at ease. I said, "It's me." I fiddled with the phone charm hanging from my phone, wondering if Jack was at the office or at home. Jack hummed in agreement, his eyes still fixed on the blueprints on the screen, and leaned back slightly. I said, "Well, I'll be back a little late tonight." It felt like when I was a kid and I'd have to let my parents know I was coming home late, but it wasn't quite the same. It felt weird. On TV, men who say, "I'm not coming home for dinner tonight," always seem perfectly fine. So why does it feel like a crime to me? Fearing Jack might misunderstand, she quickly added, "I was having dinner with Sophie." Jack leaned back in his chair, shrugged, and chuckled. "I didn't ask you," he said. "Do you want me to come over?" I waved my hand. "No need, it's just Sophie and me anyway." Hearing Jack remain silent, he asked, "Are you at work?" Jack grunted in agreement, took off his glasses, and rubbed his temples. He was about to ask her for directions when I said, "Then you get back to work." "I'll be back in a bit," and hung up. Jack listened to the dial tone, stood up, and opened the blinds. Below him was a brightly lit city. They used to talk on the phone at night. Sometimes he was sleepy, and sometimes she wanted to go to sleep first, but neither of them wanted to hang up. She would tell him to hang up first, and he would tell her to hang up first. After arguing for a while, they said they would count to 3 and hang up together. But after counting to 3, he didn't hang up, and her voice was still giggling on the other end of the phone. He was both annoyed and amused, and coaxed her to hang up. "Amy, we used to refuse to even let each other hear the cold sound of a phone hanging up. Why did things get so out of control?" I picked up the phone, hesitated for a moment, and then pushed the door open and went inside. Sophie was slightly tipsy. I swallowed a sip of my drink. Of all the drinks, beer was the one I disliked the most. It was too bitter, and not strong enough. Sophie was happy as long as she got drunk. The two chatted and laughed, and Sophie brought up her recent blind dates, which were still unsuccessful. She yelled, "Why does everyone else have to get married, but I have to too?" I knew she wanted to vent, so I kept quiet and drank with my head down. Sophie stood up, her face slightly flushed, and said loudly, "In my next life, I want to be a man." I laughed and looked up at her. Sophie plopped down, "And then marry a woman like me." I laughed so hard I choked on my beer. Sophie's famous for that. Looking at Sophie like this, I felt a pang of sadness. It reminded me of the outstanding young woman she was when she first started university, with her beautiful handwriting. During my 3 years of university, apart from hanging out with Jack, I spent the rest of my time with the other 3 roommates. During a late-night chat in our freshman year, we talked about our standards for boyfriends, each of us nitpicking and describing our criteria in the most romantic terms. A year later, none of our boyfriends resembled any particular celebrity, but they were all happily married. When I'm hungry, I can eat a whole cow, that's my ideal. After eating 2 pounds of beef, I'm full, that's reality. Looking back now, reality is far crueler than ideals. I didn't experience the needle in a haystack job search after graduation, but Sophie mentioned it, and although she described it lightly, I could imagine the hardships involved. I downed half a glass of beer and looked at Sophie, who was sitting there muttering to herself. Everyone knew that working at the loan center was a lucrative job, but only I knew that a few years ago, she had sobbed on the phone, discussing with me which job to choose. She had emailed me saying that she had recently resigned, been fired, or been wronged at her company. Finally, Sophie said, "Amy, I don't even know what I'm like now. I used to be so outspoken, but now I'm just pretending to be ignorant. Sometimes I don't know if growing up and maturing is a good thing or a bad thing. I just feel that while you gain something, you always lose something else. In the end, I become more and more numb and don't even know what I've lost anymore." Sophie, unsteady on her feet, swayed over to my side. "Come on, cheers, for you and Jack. It's fucking awesome." I drank it down, and seeing Sophie's slightly red eyes, I didn't know what to say for a moment. After Sophie finished her drink, she leaned on my shoulder and murmured, "That's great, really great." But I felt a burning heat and a damp patch on my shoulder. I reached out and gently patted Sophie's head, recalling a story from long ago. Sophie's boyfriend is a talented guy, he can play the piano and form a band. Guys like that are often a bit of a womanizer. Sophie gets heartbroken and can't even sleep well whenever she hears that her boyfriend is flirting with a girl from some department. They break up, get back together, and it's been a never-ending cycle. I said to her then, "Sophie, don't overthink it, you won't give up." Sophie's roommate sighed, "Just be good to him, be incredibly good to him. That man will definitely regret it when he breaks up with you." I immediately agreed, yes, even if we can't be the woman he loves most, we must be the woman he can never forget. Afterwards, I proudly told Jack about my idea. But he pinched my nose and said, "Don't get involved, you'll only hurt them." I'm not convinced, Sophie and I are the best of friends. Jack sighed, "Silly boy, the woman a man can never forget is definitely the woman he loved most in his life." I didn't quite understand at the time, but later I realized, you were incredibly good to him, and if he didn't love you, he'd only feel grateful. A better man would tell you not to continue doing this for him, while a worse man would simply take advantage of you. Regardless of the outcome, you could never be the woman he would never forget. The most unforgettable person is always the one who hurt him the most, only when it hurts will he remember. By the time I understood what those words meant, the boy had already left Sophie, and Jack and I were on opposite sides of the world. Whenever I think of Jack's deep eyes when he said those words, my heart begins to ache. Now, when I think about it again, I feel I have a responsibility. I didn't know what to say to Sophie, so I just kept her company as she drank glass after glass. In the end, it was Sophie who blushed, broke out in a sweat, and sobered up considerably, while I collapsed. Seeing that I was drunk, Sophie had no choice but to call Jack. Jack answered quickly, and before she could finish speaking, he said, "I'm coming." Sophie grinned and pinched my sleeping face. "Wife, you married a good husband." Jack arrived promptly, pushed open the door, and paid the bill. Sophie tossed me to Jack, who took my arm, supported my waist, looked down at my flushed face, and frowned slightly. Sophie smiled as she watched Jack wrap his arms around her. It had been so long since she had done that. Jack carried me downstairs. Sophie wanted to drive herself, but Jack insisted on giving her a ride, and she didn't refuse, climbing into Jack's car. Along the way, the lights were dim. The buses, dark and carrying passengers, moved slowly, while the green taxis drove recklessly. Sophie opened the window, and the whistling wind instantly sobered her up. Jack was still focused on driving, but I don't know when he rolled up the window on my passenger side. The car arrived, and Sophie got out. Jack rolled down the window, and Sophie said, "Congratulations." Jack smiled and said, "Thank you." He turned to look at me with a warm and sincere expression. Sophie and Jack were both naturally quiet, so they waved and said, "Bye-bye." Jack nodded and said, "Be careful," and the car sped away. Sophie watched the car drive away, rubbed her ankle, and continued walking under the streetlights, whistling. She was genuinely happy that I was back with Jack, and that things were progressing so quickly. Today, when I called her in that small cubicle, she suddenly exclaimed. She became increasingly adept at her work, but she dared not look back, dared not recall herself when she first graduated. She could only comfort herself with the thought of her achievements. When it comes to love, she can only leave it to fate. She's not Amy, and the person she loves isn't Jack. Everything slowly fades from her memory. In each relationship, she forgets the reckless abandon she once felt for someone. When going on blind dates, she always looks at education, housing, and height, information with no concrete meaning but high abstract value. That's why she was so happy for me. She herself can't go back. People become numb with age, saying things they don't mean, and holding on to fewer and fewer principles. Feelings fade with time, fewer and fewer people remain in one's heart, while the standards for judging a person increase. People become worldly and picky. But she still firmly believed in Dare and Xiaoji's love. Just like when she once saw an old man pushing another old woman's wheelchair slowly on the street, she firmly believed that the two of them loved each other so deeply that they would grow old together. Sophie unlocked the door, turned on the living room light, took off her shoes, lay down on the sofa, and turned on the TV. It was news from all over the world, robberies here, plane crashes there. The government saying they were all accidents. She thought, this world changes too fast, there are too many unexpected things. Fortunately, thankfully, there's something beautiful today that makes one smile. Married life is much more real than I imagined. One day, I said, "This bathroom needs cleaning, doesn't it?" Jack was eating breakfast, taking a sip of coffee while staring at the newspaper and grunting. I glared at him. "You're in charge." Without even looking up, he raised a handsome eyebrow. "Why?" I said, "Aren't you in charge when I'm not around?" He didn't say anything. Suddenly, a brilliant idea struck me, and I said smugly, "You'll definitely be the one cleaning, because I suffer from chronic constipation." Then I laughed loudly, "The person who uses it the most should clean it," and walked away gracefully. Jack was speechless. He put down the newspaper, rolled up his sleeves. Okay, he'd put up with it. I must admit, Jack is a very thoughtful person, and in some ways a good husband. He even gave me the keys and savings card on our wedding day. But one day, when I stood in front of the ATM, I belatedly realized that I had forgotten to ask for the PIN. I had no choice but to bite the bullet and try the passwords. His birthday, his phone number, his zip code, all failed. After several attempts, with the SIM card about to be swallowed, I finally took out my phone and dialed. Jack was in his office discussing a project with his partner when his phone suddenly rang. He never answered personal calls during office hours, and when he saw the caller ID, he frowned slightly, but still quietly said, "Excuse me, and went to the window to answer the phone. I heard him say, "Hey, what's up?" I could already picture him frowning, so I quickly replied, "Are you busy?" Jack glanced up and saw his partner peeking around, then turned aside and lowered his voice, "No rush, what's wrong?" I glanced sheepishly at the woman standing in line behind me, gestured for her to go to another ATM, and said to Jack, "No, I was thinking of going out to buy something today." As I stammered, Jack suddenly imagined her walking through the crowd. I said, "Your card." Before I could finish, he said, "It's your birthday." I exclaimed, "Ah." He then said, "The last 2 digits of the year plus the month and date." I paused for a moment, then immediately said, "Thank you," and hung up the phone. My hands trembled as I typed in the password. Suddenly, time seemed to rewind. I was sitting next to him on the computer, trying to log into his email, and I looked up to ask, "Jack, what's your password?" He was working on his homework and didn't even look up. "I'm not telling you." I randomly pressed the buttons. "Fine, don't tell me then, I'll guess." "It's just your birthday and phone number, isn't it?" Jack looked up, his big eyes bright, and smiled. What idiot would use their own information as a password? I kept pressing the button with my head down. I'm that idiot. He leaned close to me, glanced at my seemingly calm face, and smirked. "Amy, don't tell me you're the idiot." My face turned red instantly, and I threw a punch. The deposit details showed that this card had been rarely used in the past 5 years, with only a few large deposits. I stared blankly at the screen, finding it hard to imagine what he must have been feeling when he entered that PIN over the years. A sudden surge of bitterness welled up inside me, making my stomach ache. "What were you doing on May 12th? On May 12th, I was arguing with Jack. I pointed to QQ on the computer and said confidently, "Jack, did you delete my QQ account?" I added him on TT, a Chinese messaging app, back in college. After going abroad, I occasionally wanted to check on him online, even just his status update. I mustered up the courage to take a peek, but I couldn't find his TT account anymore. Now I'm starting to dredge up the old stuff. Jack, holding his laptop and drawing diagrams nearby, didn't even look up. I didn't delete it. I was furious. "See for yourself." He sighed, leaned forward, and pulled up a long list of contact information. He really didn't understand why women had such long QQ contact lists, with all sorts of people, and they'd delete the useless ones from time to time. He found her, clicked on the grayed-out avatar Summer Serenity, and glared at me. I mumbled something under my breath, grabbed the mouse, stared at the screen, and clicked, but the little arrow wouldn't move. I clicked again, still nothing. I turned around and shouted, "The computer's dead. I can't click anymore." His forehead veins bulged, and he gritted his teeth. "Of course I won't move. You're clicking my mouse." I'm quick on my feet. I switched mice, they all look so similar these days. I clicked, then blurted out, "Jack, you definitely deleted me from QQ." His hand paused as he clicked the mouse. Yes, he had once blocked her from his friends list. He hated himself for constantly checking her profile, wanting to see her social media, but afraid of being caught, so he just clicked on her picture. Her signature was always changing, so he could only guess at her current situation from that one sentence. Annoyed with his inability to let go of her, he angrily blocked her, determined to never see her again. But after a while, he would get restless and unblock her. He pursed his lips. "Amy, people who never use TT have no right to speak." I was stunned. When I was abroad, I started using MSN more often and didn't use TT much. When I did use TT, I always went invisible. I wondered if I'd run into him, afraid that both of our QQ accounts would be online at the same time, but we wouldn't talk. Our old chat history was still there, but now we were like strangers. I was terrified, so I preferred to go invisible, for him, and for myself. "What do you mean by someone who never uses TT?" Don't you even think about why I'm doing this for you." I was annoyed and made a face at Jack, who was putting on his coat. "Mr. Jack, your temper is like a rock in a latrine." I bent my index and middle fingers and made a quotation mark gesture. Jack put on his shoes, saw me making a gesture, his face turned cold, and he turned his head to the side. "Amy, I'm just a stinky rock." He slammed the door shut. Before I could turn my head, my mouth was slightly open. I really don't understand, when did Jack become so stingy? But why does my heart feel so heavy? Around noon, I received a call from Tom asking if Jack was there. I told him he was probably at the construction site. Tom said urgently, "I have another contract for him to sign, do you see if it's here?" I saw a large paper bag on the living room table, unsigned, so I guessed Jack was confused because I had upset him. Thinking I also bore some responsibility, I asked Tom for his address and said I would deliver it to him myself. That afternoon, the weather in Nanjing was all right. There weren't many tall trees in Heshi, but the sunlight wasn't too glaring. As I drove along, I only noticed that the air pressure was a bit low. I got out of the car and looked up. There was a building under construction, its original form still obscured by the steel and concrete. But the thought that it was designed by Jack made me realize that this building was different from other buildings. I took the maintenance elevator up, and it swayed as I descended, floor by floor. The young man I knew is now a man who commands respect, and I am genuinely happy for him. Jack was wearing a helmet, holding a map, and talking to someone. The orange helmet didn't look out of place on his head at all, revealing the dark blue ends of his hair underneath. He turned his head to the side, and I saw his high nose, dark eyebrows, clean light blue striped shirt, and rolled-up sleeves that revealed his fair wrists. Behind his glasses, his large eyes were meticulously focused. I waited until the person who was speaking left before walking over, looking at his straight back, and calling out, "Mr. Shoujie." Jack immediately turned around, frowning. "Why are you here?" I thought, I've come all this way to beg for peace, how can this person still act like this? I was angry and said in a bad tone, "Tom said you haven't signed the contract, so I couldn't be bothered to come." Jack paused, noticing the way I was snorting. He knew perfectly well that every time she called him Mr. Jack, she was either angry, or had done something wrong, and was coming to him. He was just worried that she'd come to the construction site alone, and that idiot wasn't even wearing a safety helmet. He strode over, and I thought he was going to raise his hand, so I jumped to the side. But instead, he took off his own helmet, pressed it onto my head, and turned to call out to the person who had just spoken, "Could you please get me another helmet?" With the hat he was wearing warming his head on my head, my heart warmed up too. Yang said, "Hurry up and sign it, I'll leave right away." He took her hand. "I'll go down with you first, it's too dangerous." I was afraid of delaying his work. "It'll be quick, I'll leave myself after you sign." Jack took a breath. "Amy, why are you so disobedient?" May 12, 2:28 p.m., a moment no one expected. The building suddenly shook. A piece of my heart sank, and I reflexively turned to look at Jack. But a dark shadow loomed over us. "Get down." His deep, powerful voice was right next to my ear. The building began to stir, accompanied by the creaking and rattling of steel bars. My head was against his chest, and all I could hear was the steady thumping of his heart. His warm, large hand covered my eyes, yet I felt fearless. I reached out and grasped his hand tightly, and as if knowing this, he held on firmly. Actually, the amplitude of the tremors was very small and the duration was short, it subsided quickly. He helped me up. I thought he was going to yell at me, but instead he bent down first and reached out his fair hand to brush the dust off my pants. Looking at him bending down, imagining him rushing over and embracing me, my heart pounded, and my eyes reddened, from lingering fear, and from my own bad temper. If anything had actually happened, I think I would have died of resentment. Jack, oblivious, didn't even flinch. After dusting me off, he patted his own pants, walked to the side, and picked up his glasses. They were dirty, he decided not to wear them. Turning around, she saw me with my head bowed in repentance. Tapped me on the head, and said irritably, Amy, I'm telling you, all you know how to do is be ruthless with me. I tugged at his arm. Mr. Shoujie, I'm sorry, I'll make you wintermelon and duck tongue soup tonight. I said it pitifully, but I couldn't hide the smile in my eyes. He pinched the corner of her mouth. You'd better not eat duck tongue, lest someone starts cursing and swearing. While she was protesting with wide eyes, he suddenly kissed her forehead. Actually, he was really worried just now, and his hands are still shaking, but he won't tell her. In the car, I watched him. He was gripping the steering wheel. Driving at night in the rain was difficult, but he slightly turned his head, his eyes still fixed on the road ahead. When I arrived at my apartment complex and opened the car door, a thunderous crash echoed through the air. I patted my heart, sigh, one shouldn't do anything that goes against one's conscience. Jack opened his thick, long-handled plaid umbrella, freeing his right hand to grasp my hand with his left. Amy, are you scared? I'm easily provoked, so I straightened my back and said, what are you afraid of? This is my territory, I'm in charge. Come on, follow me. After saying that, he disappeared into the dark stairwell. Jack closed his umbrella, shook off the raindrops, smiled, and started walking upstairs. I jumped up and down, bouncing back and forth as I switched on the light. Jack, let me tell you, don't let my fierce appearance fool you, my mom is actually easy to deal with. The real problem is my dad. If I cough, don't say a word, if I give him a look, get moving and be quick to bring him tea and water. Jack looked up at her, his big, fluffy head nodding earnestly, and smiled faintly, okay. I rang the doorbell. When Mother Bear opened the door, and saw her daughter's face, she wanted to yell at her. Seeing my mom practically spitting on her face, I quickly grabbed her hand and said eagerly, Dear Mom, I have something to tell you. I've found you a son-in-law. Congratulations. The mother bear was so dizzy from being shaken around that she squeezed her hand back and patted her daughter's hand, saying, Not at all, congratulations to you too. Before I could finish speaking, I realized something was wrong. In a flash, she twisted my ear and yelled, You brat! Are you trying to kill me? You're trying to lie to your old mother like that. I haven't even settled the score with you yet. I quickly winked behind me. Jack was standing at the back, but when the door opened, I took a step back, and he followed suit, stepping behind the door as well. Hearing the mother and daughter talking, he was practically suffocating. He stepped forward, helped me up, nodded, and said, Hello, Auntie. This startled Mama Bear. A living person had appeared out of nowhere. The young man was quite handsome, with delicate features, large eyes, and an earnest gaze. I looked at my mother, then took Jack's hand. Mom, this is Jack. Papa Bear brought out a purple clay teapot, glanced outside, and said, Mr. Jack, please come in and have a seat. After settling down, Dad adjusted his reading glasses, his dark eyes scrutinizing Jack. After a moment, he put down the teapot, somewhat excited, and asked, Are you Yang Sheng and Jing Qiu's child? Jack nodded and stood up. Hello, Uncle. Papa Bear stood up, patted Jack on the shoulder, looked at him with an appreciative gaze, and nodded, Come on, follow me to the study. I couldn't turn my head until my dad and current husband went into the study. What's going on here? After a long while, the door opened, and I rushed in like a family member waiting at the emergency room entrance. My dad and Jack actually came out smiling. Upon seeing me, Zhongyang patted his daughter's head and said, Little Mao, now that you have a husband, you don't need your dad anymore. How could I dare? I wrapped my arms around Xiongba's waist and called him Dad, just like when I was a child and would ask my dad for something. Papa Bear turned around. Jack, sit for a while longer. Jack smiled, his smile revealing his sincerity. No, it's raining, I should go home early. I ran to the sofa to get my bag, but Jack called out to me, Amy, you should stay here. I turned around and glared at them. Did the negotiations fall through and they just leave her here? Seeing her dazed expression, Jack walked over to her, leaned close to her ear, and whispered in a voice only the two of them could hear, My dear wife, I'll grant you a night off. You can finish what you were doing when you get back. I never expected Jack to openly harass an innocent woman in broad daylight, right under my parents' noses. Angrily, I looked up and saw his beautiful, upturned eyes, and his dark eyes seemed to overflow with honey. Xie Jingxing patted my cheek and then spoke loudly, Get some rest. I'll come pick you up tomorrow. When Mama Bear saw that her daughter had stayed, she was even more impressed with Jack's thoughtfulness, and called out to me, Take a flashlight, and hurry up and deliver it. I used a flashlight to escort Jack out of the building. The two of them lingered at the small stairwell entrance, reluctant to part. What exactly did my dad say to you? Jack didn't answer, but lowered his head, a mischievous smile playing on his beautiful eyes. Amy, so your nickname is Little Hair. I got angry and slapped him. He patted my messy hair. After tonight, you won't have another chance to come and stay for another night. I know he arranged this because he was worried that I rarely have time to spend with my family. But he just wouldn't say it properly. I'll come back whenever I feel like it. Jack glared at me, his eyes widening, and pressed my face down. Look at my eyes. It was hilarious to see my big eyes staring at me like that. I burst out laughing. He sighed and hugged my warm body. After a while, he said, You have a good father. I grabbed his arm and said seriously, My dad will be your dad from now on. Jack replied, Okay. He immediately broke into a smile, his eyes and brows melting into a beautiful bloom in the rainy night. In the evening, after washing up, as I sat in the living room and turned on the TV, I saw Jack emerge from the shower wearing a t-shirt, trousers, a soft towel around his neck, and water droplets on his head. Unfortunately, I was reminded of the unfinished business. He cried out that something was wrong. But upon reflection, he wasn't actually opposed to it. His heart was just racing and he was getting nervous. Jack grabbed his water glass and sat down. I reflexively tossed him the remote. Here, watch the game. He grabbed my hand before I could pull it back, his misty eyes shining with warmth. After a moment, he released her hand and took a sip of water. Comrade Amy, don't be nervous. I suddenly remembered and asked, You and brother Zhong Yang, that's my dad, knew each other before? He turned his head, glanced at her nervous expression, and asked coolly, Have you seen the photos? I suddenly felt I was in the wrong and stammered, I thought your mom, your dad, and my dad were. He sighed and tapped her head, Silly girl, don't think about things you shouldn't be thinking about. What do you think it is? An extramarital affair? A love triangle? Knowing I was in the wrong, I muttered, How would I know? I paused, then added, I'm rather slow-witted. I emphasized the word slow-witted, which, upon closer listening, sounded endearingly clumsy. Jack burst out laughing. In the past, when this silly girl did something wrong and he got angry, she would just say this, her bright black eyes looking especially like a puppy's, and she would say clumsily, I'm rather slow-witted, emphasizing each word. At that time, no matter how angry he was, hearing these words made him both angry and amused, and he no longer held back. Today, she nestled on his sofa, her eyes sparkling, and she repeated those words again, instantly captivating his heart, and reminding him of that girl from his youth. He lifted her chin, leaned closer, his eyes gleaming with a seductive light, and called to her, Say it again. She knew what he was thinking, and her face flushed instantly. But looking into his eyes, she obediently repeated, I'm rather slow-witted. His soft lips pressed against hers in an instant, his tongue entwining with hers, his mouth filled with the faint scent of wine and the sweet aroma of vanilla toothpaste. His smooth touch sent her body limp. After a long while, he stepped back, leaned close to her ear, and whispered, "I love you," saying that. Hearing those warm words, "I love you," made her ears burn red. His tongue slid down her earlobe, the water droplets on her hair brushing against her skin, hot and wet. His fingertips slid down, and her face flushed crimson. She called out, "Shou Jie." He suddenly scooped her up in his arms. As she was lifted into the air, she cried out, "The TV's still on." He seemed not to hear her, lowered his head, kissed her lips, and kicked open the door. On the dark blue sheets, her damp hair was stained a dark shade. He looked at her, his gaze deepening. Their fair bodies intertwined, her fingertips piercing his damp black hair. He kissed each of her fingers, planting a dense flame within them. The alluring heat in the air, the beautiful curves of his body, the warmth of his touch, she explored every muscle and joint of his body, feeling no fear, only a profound and beautiful intimacy. Her heartbeat swayed with his, and her body was imbued with his scent. She was nervous yet sweet, too shy to know what to do. He straightened up, wiped her sweaty hair, held her hand tightly, looked at her with his dark, bright eyes, and coaxed her, "Amy, call me." He stared intently at her, her back a beautiful curve, her teeth clenched, radiating an energy ready to erupt. She felt lost, shy, yet also excited. She touched his face with both hands and called out, "Jack, little Jack." All the brilliance burst forth in an instant, blooming into beautiful flowers amidst the intertwined bodies. Later, I went back to the United States for work. After finishing my business, I slowly walked along the campus path, rubbing my hands together and pulling my coat tighter. Even with plenty of sunshine, the American winter was still frighteningly cold. I glanced at the library building entwined with vines, remembered what Jack had said, and pushed open the door to go inside. As soon as I opened the door, a wave of warmth hit me. The library was nearly empty during the post-Christmas holiday. I walked up the steps. This library, donated by alumni, is almost a century old. My footsteps creaked on the wooden steps. Most of the bookshelves have been renovated and replaced with iron shelves. Only the innermost row of each shelf retains the wooden shelves, which hold very old documents that are rarely read. Thinking about Jack's words, I walked over, my heart pounding. This row of bookshelves is truly old, with thick volumes of documents bound together, the pages yellowed with age. The air carries the scent of worn-out pages, yet possesses a profound and luxurious quality. Sunlight streamed through the window and into this corner. I squinted and crouched down, searching the side of the third floor by the window. I looked for a long time, but there was nothing there. I was a little disappointed, but I wasn't giving up. I randomly picked up a few books, put them on the ground, and then glanced up at them casually, and froze. This bookshelf was originally filled with books, but after a few were removed, there was room. On the inner side near the window, there is a line of slanted text on the mahogany base, in Chinese characters and uppercase English letters, tilted upwards from low to high. In the dim light, a line of words could be seen carved on the dark old wooden board. "Dai, Dai, do you stay remember, Shou Jie?" The last question mark was extremely difficult to carve, and it was a bit crooked, but the dot was very deep, piercing through the eyes and landing in the heart. My hand slowly traced the words, and a tear rolled down onto the grain of the wooden floor with a plop. I always referred to myself as Big I and him as Little G, thinking he didn't take it to heart. It turns out that for the past 5 long years, he's been thinking the same thing, asking the same questions. Big I, do you still remember Little G? I wondered when he came to this town. He walked here silently, climbed the steps, and with what kind of mood did he carve these words, stroke by stroke? I imagine a boy once standing here, kneeling, back bent, meticulously carving with a Swiss Army knife. Sunlight streamed through the window pane, illuminating his straight shoulders, and dappled light danced on his dark hair. Dust rose in the air, tiny, fine particles, like grains of memory. His focused profile was bathed in the slanting light of time, the most beautiful scene of his life. Over the past 5 years, it turns out he really did come looking for me. Whether he just wanted to sneak a peek, or was ready to stand before me, he did come after all. Over the past 5 years, the books have moved, and the marks they left behind, the words they wanted to say, have all faded and become mottled on the floating wall of time. Dear passengers, this flight has arrived at Shanghai Pudong Airport on time. Thank you for flying with us, and we wish you a pleasant journey. I shook my head. After eating and sleeping for more than 10 hours, all my temper had been worn down. My hair was a mess, so I had to go to the bathroom first. I was startled when I went in, a row of girls in front of the bathroom mirror, some combing their hair, some touching up their makeup. I scratched my afro, it didn't matter how I scratched it anyway. Someone, apparently, was coming to pick me up. After thinking for a moment, I slowly dug a lipstick out of my bag, carefully applied it to my lips in front of the mirror, and then gave a quick pop. The customs inspector seemed less indifferent than usual. He glanced at the passport, nodded, and casually asked, "Going home?" I nodded, smiled brightly, revealing dimples, and said earnestly, "Let's go home." He was taken aback for a moment, then with a flick of his hand, a small oval stamp appeared on his red passport. It was still a noisy airport, still bustling with crowds, and still the dazzling, towering cylindrical glass ceiling. I found a trolley, stood in front of the baggage claim area, and my phone vibrated in my palm. I answered the phone, and the voice was as cheerful as a sparrow in the morning. "Hello, yes, we've arrived, we are here to get our luggage." A clear, sweet voice came from the other end. "I'm at gate 10, waiting for you to come out." I said, "Okay, see you later." I've discovered I absolutely love this phrase, "see you later, I'll see you in a little while." Airports are always a place of contradictions. Some cry, some laugh, some hug, some wave, some hurry by, some look back and forth. At such moments, in such places, fate is like a series of soft red threads, spreading from between the little fingers, intertwining, and entwining us like vines. As I stepped outside, the glass doors opened automatically, and I could hear the honking of cars. The sunlight was dazzling, and I raised a hand to shield my forehead. After my eyes adjusted, I lowered it, only to realize that spring was approaching back home. Where in America the branches were still bare and upright, here they were swaying branches, possessing a delicate, southern grace. Tiny new green shoots were sprouting among the branches, shimmering and tender, swaying in the morning breeze. I squinted and looked. The person leaned against the car, back to the sunlight, standing in front of the lush trees, in front of the intersecting roads, smiling gently at me. Just as I had imagined many years ago, that boy from back then stood there quietly, sunlight gently caressing his eyes and brows. The smile that once blossomed beneath the camphor tree, that once so bright and clear face, none of it had faded. He was still standing there, guarding the exit of dreams, lingering in the scenery of the 4 seasons, smiling softly like this. The wind whipped at my clothes, and I brushed my windblown hair aside. He came over, took the cart, and immediately began to scold me, "Idiot, don't stand in the wind, you'll catch a cold." As he spoke, his tall frame shielded her from half the cold wind. He seemed about to say something more, but he turned his head, a smile revealing shallow dimples, his large eyes bright. He took my hand and simply said, "Let's go, I've ordered takeout. Let's go home, our Huang is still waiting for us." Sometimes, you don't need 1,000 words, fancy phrases, or roses and lilies. He simply said, "Let's go home, our Huang is waiting for us there, that's enough." And so, hand in hand, they slowly pushed their luggage and disappeared into the moving crowd.